Today is the last Sunday of January, the last in our series of 4 sermons about the mystery of church membership. Today I want us to think about reality in ministry. That is, the practical experience of ministry in everyday life and membership, the practical experience of that. Now, Paul's letter to the church at Corinth, there are 2 of those that we have. Surely he probably wrote others. But these 2 are before us as information about how the early church dealt with its membership and with its real life. And Corinth was, in the first century Middle East, perhaps the greatest of the great melting pots. People from all over the world, from all sorts of backgrounds, were in Corinth and surely were a part of the church at Corinth. And when you read those letters, you see that they came from all sorts of different backgrounds and they had different ideas about how things were done. And Paul wrote to them in some ways to commend them for what they had done, but also to remind them that they could do better. And we have kept these letters through the years because they still connect to what we do in the church. And so the connections for us from the exhortations and the admonitions of Paul are what I want us to look at today. What is church in real life like? Well, let me tell you a brief story that I heard some time ago. It was about a man who was shipwrecked all by himself on a very small island. But it was an island that had the resources necessary to sustain human life. And he happened to have enough of the skills and surely enough luck to make it for 3.5 years before a passing ship finally saw one of his SOS fires one day. And they sent a boat to rescue him. And when they got there, they found that he was actually in pretty good shape. He had not been destroyed by the wild of this little island. And so as they were getting ready to leave, they noticed that on the island there, visible from the beach, were actually 3 little huts, if you will, that had been built with grass and leaves and things like that and sticks. And so as they were leaving the island, one of the rescuers said to the man, "Tell me about these little huts there." And he said, "Well, the one in the middle, that's my house." And it was, very simple, just a shelter to keep you out of the rain, not Gilligan's Island here. And they said, "Well, what about that one down the beach that we can see there on the left?" And he said, He said, "That's my church." And as they were leaving, there was another one down to the right. And they said, "What about that 3rd hut?" And he said, "Oh, that's where I used to go to church." Sometimes we'd even like to choose not to be around ourselves, it seems. But church is the place where we are called to wrestle with both the blessings and the challenges of diversity. Quite honestly, I don't know how you would survive in a church that was not diverse. If everybody believed the same thing, practiced the same thing, worked the same place, lived the same place, thought all the same things, most of us would be unnecessary, wouldn't we? Church is the place where we are called to wrestle with both the blessings and the challenges of diversity. So I looked at Paul's letter in just a small section that we have here, and the part I left out in the middle there was just more details in Paul's whole metaphor of foot and hand and body and all of those sorts of things. And you can go back and look at those. But what I want you to look at right now is the front of your bulletin. Did you notice that the picture of First Presbyterian Church is not on the front there today? That's on purpose. This conglomeration of words, I don't know exactly what you would call it technically speaking or artistically speaking, but the technical term for that is a wordle, W-O-R-D-L-E, form of the word word that was made up by somebody who created a computer program that would take any size collection of words from anywhere, scripture, song, a letter, a story, even the text from a website. You could paste into this thing and tell it how many of the primary words you want it to gather, and then to create this word art based on the number of times that words are repeated. That is, the larger a word is in the word art, the more times it is repeated in the text that you have put in there. And so I put in the text that we just read from the New Revised Standard into this program and said, take the top 30 words that are repeated, and it kicks out and thee and all those words that are repeated over and over but really don't add to the significance of the meaning. And you'll notice here that the biggest words, the ones that are repeated over and over, are body. And if it weren't for the designation between member and members, that might be the very largest word all by itself. One body. Members we are. Spirit, need, greater, gifts, many. All of those words, those are among the top 30 words in this text. And the larger ones are repeated more than any other. So that might be what you call running the numbers to see what is the important stuff that Paul repeats over and over in this letter, in this portion of the letter, to get the members of the church at Corinth to understand what he believes is the most significant thing that they need to focus on as they attempt to follow the risen Christ and live and share the gospel. It reminded me as I was running these numbers about what I was doing last weekend in Oxford, Mississippi with the leadership team of Living Waters for the World, the mission and ministry project that we participate in on a regular basis. We were there to talk about what the future of Living Waters for the World might hold and how they will transition as they move from a synod committee that operates Living Waters for the World into a more formalized board model, and how we might give input to that as those who have been involved for a number of years. And my part being there was not necessarily so much about providing leadership as it was that I have been the moderator of the Guatemala network in Living Waters for the last 3 years. So all of the network, the 9 network leaders were invited to be a part of that. But Living Waters is an organization that has been around for 20 years now. This is their 20th, and this year a big 20th anniversary celebration has been planned to take place all year long. And one of the culminations of that is at the end of October in Guatemala, because it is one of the central locations and one of the places where the people from all of the countries where we work can get access. They can travel, unlike most of them would have a very difficult time traveling here. We're going to have an International Networks Conference from Ghana and Haiti and the Dominican Republic and all of the places in Peru where there are networks. Everybody is going to gather in Guatemala to work for a week on combining the knowledge that we have and information, and also making sure we understand what our task is for the next years as the board leads us. But as we were working there last weekend, we went through some exercises. As a matter of fact, a couple weeks ago I talked to you about, remember the TED Talk from the Simon Sinek guy about the why and the how and the what? That's actually one of the exercises they did at the Living Waters retreat. And so they took the information and distilled it there and came up with their own principles of why and how and what that they would be doing over the next year, the next 5 and 10 years. And it reminded me that Living Waters in a lot of ways is a lot like the church in that we share a similar mission, a commitment to Jesus Christ and to spread the word and to live the gospel. And theirs is just a particular living related to water. But this is a very vibrant mission organization that is growing and responsive to real needs. And an organization like that requires all kinds of different people to make it work. Just like Paul writes to the church at Corinth. It required a visionary, Will Howey, who had this vision while we were still in seminary together about treating water for the number of people in the world, the vast number of people in the world who do not have access to clean, safe water. So it required someone who majored in possibility, a visionary. It also required engineers, folks who measure in concrete terms, because when Will had this great vision, he didn't know how to build a water filtration system, and he gathered together a group of engineers to help him do that. And over a period of the first few years, as they were trying to figure out how to make it work, the first system they had about 12 different filters on it. It had some alkyl chloride stuff I can't even pronounce. Very complex system, and surely it would work. But they ran into some problems with it because the parts that were used to build it and the complexity of it made it difficult both to replicate in a developing country and to teach others how to operate it. So they also needed what actually became a pool guy. A guy who came and looked at the system with all its complexity, and his first response was, "Y'all have turned the engineers loose on this, haven't you?" He said, "We can do the same thing with a sediment filter, 2 carbon filters, and an ozonator. Technology designed to filter pool water will do the exact same thing very simply and is available in developing countries because, believe it or not, in almost every developing country, there is an elite class of folks who have swimming pools and who need those sorts of things. So they're actually available there. So it took a visionary, it took an engineer, it took a pool guy, it took a presbytery and a synod that created the organizational structure for this that has kept it going through the years. It took congregations and civic groups like ours and the Rotary Club of Fayetteville and the congregations around us that become the volunteers and participate. And then after they had done this for a few times and went back on their first few installations, they realized that they were missing a critical piece: education. In a culture where no one has ever had clean water, understanding the importance of hygiene and how you keep that water clean long enough for it to be good for you, and the important places when it is very limited in quantity, when the places where you need to use it and the places where you can get by without using it. All those are a part of the education process, a component that was added some years after the whole part started. So they needed teachers, and then as it began to grow, they needed funding folks, those folks who not only knew how to count money, but knew how to ask for it and knew where to get it. And they needed development and awareness people who could share the story far and wide. And most of all, they needed people like us. People like the folks in this congregation who have supported by their gifts and prayers, and also folks who have actually traveled to Guatemala to help with installations there. And it reminded me of why I love Living Waters so much. Because when you're focused on fulfilling a specific vision like that, there really is no such thing as we've always done it that way. First of all, they're only 20 years old. That gives them one advantage in that conversation. But the main reason is that the only legitimate reason for continuing to do something in a particular way or continuing to do it at all is because it is the most effective way you found to carry out your mission. And so every time that the Living Waters team and leaders get together, they're always making changes. They're always deciding that something they've learned in the field or something they've learned from somebody who knows the system and the way it works better than they do has taught them that there are changes that need to be made. And so when you go to one of their schools, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, Clean Water U, if you went last year and you went again this year, you would learn some new things. Not to mention the last 9 years as evolved over time. So it's all about finding effective ways to carry out the mission. And Clean Water U was one of those. They realized that this organization started 20 years ago, 1993, when it was just a vision of a few who gathered at a Presbyterian committee. And they were given the task of pushing forward with that. But it took 3 years before they ever put the first system in 1996 on the border of Texas and Mexico. And over the course of the first 11 years, they managed to put in 12 systems. These are small batch systems that only help a community of 300 to 500, maybe 1,000 or so at the most. So you can see that they realized early on that if they were going to actually do some large-scale good, they needed more people. And they realized the best way to do that was to teach other people how to do it. And so in 2004, after 11 years and only putting 12 systems in, they created this thing at Oxford, Mississippi called Clean Water U, and they built a building that looks like a building in a developing country, mostly concrete, with concrete pad on the roof where you could put water tank up there and use gravity flow and not have to have an additional pump. And they brought in their first group of students, so the first Clean Water U in March of 2004. And there were about 50 or 60 people. So obviously the development and awareness folks had gotten the story out through presbyteries and churches and other groups. And there were people from all over the world. And Steve Young, who's now the new executive director of Living Waters, now that Will is preparing to retire, told us this story last week. He said, I realized that we had hit on something accidentally that really worked at that first Clean Water U. So we had about 5 people who were trying to teach all these 50 people. And we were kind of making it up as we go because we'd only installed a few systems ourselves. We had all these people together and we divided them up into 3 different classes and we were teaching them different things. Actually, people learned how to put the system together. Other people learning about the whole education, health and hygiene and the spiritual curriculum. And then a third group learning about leadership and partnership development and those sorts of things. And he said, we were struggling to teach these folks, but after about 2 days, we began to notice that there was a power and an energy within those folks that did not come surely from what we were trying to teach them. It came from their ability to come together over a common goal. And he said, after I had sensed that energy and that power, I was walking through the campus one day at Camp Hopewell, and their parking places are all sort of up at the front where everybody has to park together. They don't park all over the place. And he said, I walked by 17 cars, counted them, 17 cars from different places, mostly the southeast, but different parts of the United States. And he said that was interesting to note that we had gotten the word out beyond Mississippi or Tennessee. But he said the other thing I noticed that really made me know that we had accomplished something that was important was the bumper stickers on the cars. 17 cars, he said I counted 12 political bumper stickers. 6 of them were W. The other 6, W with a circle and a red line through it. And he said that didn't stop us from doing what we were doing. These people were committed enough to put a bumper sticker on their car and surely could have had conversations about their politics and created some division and some differences and some debate, but they were focused on a common goal of providing clean water to people in developing countries that needed it, and they set aside their differences to reach toward a common goal. Effective mission and ministry, and indeed effective membership in church, gives perspective to our differences and does not allow them to become overblown and divisive. And at the same time, that mission and ministry helps to bring us together, to combine us through our common bonds and our common goals. Surely that is what keeps this congregation together, because we are a diverse congregation. And diversity is an important part of who we are. Not because we have to have some Gallup poll and decide where the middle line is and walk that with everybody in one line on a tightrope, but because it gives us an opportunity to learn and to grow from others and their ideas and their perspectives and their own experiences. So we at First Presbyterian Church also have a need for all of those things that Paul wrote about: the hands and the feet and the ears and the eyes and the mouths, and certainly the minds and the hearts. But we also need visionaries, those who dream in possibilities, and we need engineers, those who are measurers and are careful with their measurements, and we need pool guys to do simplification when we make it too complex, and we need educators to help people understand what they don't know, and organizers and funding folks and people who can tell the story, and we need volunteers, and we need you, all of you. Because ministry and mission is a shape-shifting undertaking. So not taking the metaphor literally and making it where each one of us has to be a certain part of the body and stay that way. You're the hands, I'm the feet, whatever. We understand that during the course of a day and the week and a lifetime and a year, we change from what we need and what we are capable of doing among all those things. And surely some of us are better and more comfortable at doing some of them than others, and others the same way. But we need people who think with their heart and people who feel with their minds, because those are two entirely different things. And we need people who can look at information and make a decision quickly, but also people who will look at all of the details and want to wait. Because somewhere in between those two lies the possibility of analysis without paralysis. We need people who use their intuition and people who put things together logically. And we need those folks to work together. And so I would ask you, as those who are members and those who are in worship and maybe are not members yet, who may be thinking about it, I'd ask you this. Have you arrived, well, you're here today, obviously, so you've arrived in one way or another, but have you arrived here by some connection in this worship service or another, or with a group of women or men or youth or some other group that does something that connects you to this congregation? Have you arrived, and have you felt two things? Comfort and challenge together. Those are not opposites. Because I would suggest to you that the definition of home is somewhere that is a safe place to grow. Home is not a safe place to hide. That's a shelter. Home is a safe place to grow. Have you arrived? Have you felt both comfortable and challenged? And have you identified the many ways that you can serve and the needs that you might have and how those might be met? And finally, do you resonate with our call to reveal God's grace now and to all generations? If that makes you know that whether you know how to do it or can figure out what that means, or you're good at it or not, you know it's something you want to do. Not something you ought to do, but something you really want to do. Reveal God's grace now and to all generations. If that's something you want to be a part of, I want to say to you, welcome home.